So the company behind the Jake Paul vs. Ben Askren fight, Triller, has ended up refiling their lawsuit against H3H3. But this time, instead of H3 being added to a general piracy lawsuit targeting multiple people, this lawsuit is specifically targeted towards them. And because of that, we have new information on what exactly Triller is suing H3 for, since it was relatively vague in the last one, considering that there were multiple defendants. So H3 is specifically being sued for copyright infringement, 2 violations of Federal Communications Act, conversion, violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and vicarious copyright infringement. Half of that stuff I don't even know what it means, but when I read the document, essentially what they are claiming is that H3 permanently hindered them with rampant theft of the copyrighted work, linking specifically the H3 podcast channel. They are saying this theft has resulted in $50 million in damages, $50 for each view, and say that H3 obtained the pay-per-view content through utilization of various torrent and streaming websites. So I talked about this more in depth in this video, but essentially what Triller could get H3 for here boils down to 3 different things. One is him saying he pirated it.
I bootlegged it. I pirated it.
So he would get the same type of punishment as any regular user who would have pirated the fight, completely separate from his H3 show. The second one was the link that he showed to the unlisted 14 minutes of footage of the pay-per-view event. That unlisted video is not fair use and is taking content straight from the pay-per-view event, and the link was shown on his show. So despite the fact that only 21 people ended up typing in that link to click on it and watch it, he would still be responsible for those 21 unpaid views. And the third thing, which is specifically what they are saying is causing $50 million in damages, would be his fair use coverage of the 14-minute unlisted video, in which he only reacted to about 30 seconds of the footage, and during that entire time he was commentating over it.
First of all, they fought for like, what, a few minutes?
On the top of the head,
like a minute and a half.
And Ben looked awful. He looked awful. Like, look at him. He doesn't know what he's doing.
His form was off.
He doesn't know how to defend himself. He doesn't know how to throw a punch. You know? And, you know, he didn't even block the punch, and the whole thing looks like a comic book. Like, look how he falls to the ground. It's like, and then the ref calls it immediately. I was like, dude, what did I just watch? This is such a fucking clown fest. Look at this. And then he calls it. I was like, no, I seriously did not stay up and waste my whole Saturday night to not even see Jake Paul get hit once. I don't know why that ref called it, bro. I know he was dazed. He was fucked. The fight was a joke.
Ignoring the blur I put there in order to avoid me getting sued, do you think that coverage is in any way a replacement for buying the full pay-per-view fight? Personally, I don't think it is. I think if you're interested enough to pay for the fight, this won't be a suitable replacement, as H3 is consistently talking over it, and in my opinion, it's 100% fair use. Although fair use only can be finally determined by a judge, but those judges do go based off the fair use guidelines we know, and based on those guidelines, I think most reasonable judges would file in favor of H3. What Triller could get H3 for, though, is him pirating it and him sharing the link to the 14 minutes of footage, which ended up getting 21 views. But in the filing, they specifically linked the H3 podcast channel and referred to the video with 1 million views, rather than referring to Zach's channel and the unlisted video titled Jake Knockout, which is what I think they would be in the right for. But instead, they sued for the 1 million view podcast, which I think, and I think most judges would think, is fair use. Anyways, Ethan responded himself to Triller refiling the lawsuit in the 36th episode of his podcast H3 After Dark. Here is what he said.
I'm the only person they refiled against.
Wow.
Pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
So their $100 million of alleged losses all comes down to the H3 podcast watching a 45-second clip and fair usage 5 days after the live event. And they have suffered catastrophic loss. We're in we're in settlement talks right now to see if we can work it out. I do think it's important to be very clear that this is a fair use lawsuit. They are attacking our right to cover their footage. It's Matt Haas 2.0, except we're up against deep pockets and they're way scarier than Matt Haas. Don't get it twisted, right? This is literally a fair use lawsuit, and they say it in their complaint, in their lawsuit. They say their damages is that I rebroadcasted their fight to 1 million people, and that's why they're suing us for $50 million. That's a fair use argument. That is every person that viewed our podcast. They're saying you do not have the right to critique and criticize our footage. But it's also like this propaganda where they're trying to make it seem like, oh, it's not a fair use thing. The guy stole our fight. It's like, really, 45 seconds of me talking over the whole clip on a 4-hour event? This lawsuit is an attack on what everybody on YouTube does. That they can just come at you with this poorly conceived lawsuit that barely any effort or research was put into and try to shake you down for hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's why we fought the Matt Haas lawsuit. You know, Matt Haas tried to shake us down for $4,000 and I told him to go fuck himself, and we fought it all the way. There's also other conditions to the settlement, which I'll probably talk about later, that are ludicrous, that will never fucking happen in a million years, that affects everybody, right?
H3 went more in depth on it on the full podcast, but what I just showed you there is essentially the core of what he had to say. I 100% agree with him on this issue, as I very heavily rely on fair use for my own content, and have been unfairly targeted legally by YouTubers like Pokimane and other people with false copyright complaints. I definitely would not like to see Triller win this lawsuit, as it would be a major step back in what we can do with fair use. I mean, if what H3 did with the Jake Paul fight on his podcast specifically is not allowed, what type of reactionary content is allowed? If that's not allowed, me showing Pokimane's Twitter video definitely wouldn't have been allowed, and she would have been able to successfully strike me. Hell, maybe reading other people's tweets wouldn't even be allowed. My channel and many other channels on YouTube would cease to exist legally if Triller were to win this lawsuit. So I'm definitely rooting for Ethan in this specific case, and I hope he wins the lawsuit. A case where I'm not rooting for Ethan, though, is his continuing coverage of Keemstar and Etika, which I initially covered in this video. He talks about it more in the newest After Dark. Here is what he says.
So Keemstar, who, as you all know, is the worst person in the world. On the last episode, we were like, where's the fuck? Why do you have an Etika folder on your desktop? You remember? Right. And we're like, you're psychotic. So Keemstar thought he'd be cute and make an NTF of Keemstar's NFT of Keemstar's desktop. Except there's one folder missing. The one that we all thought was the super creepiest. He's like, look, I'm gonna make a joke out of this. Except where's the Etika folder that we all saw? And the top comment is, Keem, we're gonna need an explanation on the Etika folder.
Like all of the comments were about that.
Of course.
Of course.
Let's make an NFT of the Etika folder.
That's the correct one.
And that's the real fucking, obviously not, but such a fucking weirdo. Yeah, exactly. Since we noticed Keemstar had that Etika folder on his desktop, and it really disturbed all of us, we were actually able to leverage some of our... Here's the screenshot for the record. Etika. Top left, that's the most accessible one. Spotify, Etika. Steam, Etika. Keemstar, he's going against his own self-interest and all of YouTube's by snitching on me to Triller. Here's in his own words.
I don't think Triller's looking to go to war with like a creator. You know what I mean?
No, sure they are. They are. I talked to him.
That's just part one. Here's the part where one of his friends explicitly says the following.
Keemstar called into Nick's stream, and he said, look, yeah, I did snitch to Triller. All right, I snitched to them. I told him that he admitted to pirating your fight on the show, and sure enough, something happened to Ethan, so fuck him. Because Ethan's been trying to go after me and go after, hell, my right to own a kid. That's what Keemstar said, and that's true. Like, literally last week, the last episode we took a look at on the H3 podcast, they're literally talking about how Keemstar shouldn't have a kid, how...
I wish Keemstar didn't have a kid, but I didn't say he shouldn't have a kid. These kids are so demented, bro. So he goes, I'm gonna snitch on H3 to Triller and fuck up all of fair use for all of YouTube just to get a one-up on Ethan.
So that unnamed person they were playing on the podcast to was quoting Keemstar is actually my friend Augie RFC. He has a great channel, you should definitely check it out. But since he's being attacked by Ethan here, I figured I'd give you guys some clarification on what's actually happening, because Augie is not demented. First off, he calls Keemstar his friend. This is not true. They are acquaintances, but not friends. Second off, Augie is just quoting what Keemstar said, so none of these words are actually coming from Augie, besides his claim that Ethan said Keemstar shouldn't have a kid on the last H3 episode. And that one statement from Augie himself isn't actually untrue, because if we look at the episode he was talking about, you can see Trisha and Ethan say this.
Honestly, this person shouldn't have a daughter. Like, that, I don't know how these people can even be, like, parents, have, like, a child. And, like, you know, I don't know. I know I get hate for it. Could be like, shouldn't talk about kids, but, like, that's so gross that this is the father of a girl.
No, yeah, it is sad that he has a daughter.
Because Ethan's been trying to go after me and go after, hell, my right to own a kid. That's what Keemstar said, and that's true. Like, literally
true.
Last week, the last episode we took a look at on the H3 podcast, they're literally talking about how Keemstar shouldn't have a kid, how...
I wish Keemstar didn't have a kid, but I didn't say he shouldn't have a kid.
Honestly, this person shouldn't have a daughter. Like, he's so gross.
No, yeah, it is sad that he has a daughter because, like, she's not gonna get the fucking. She's not gonna get a good, healthy male role model. That's for sure.
It's so gross.
But I didn't say he shouldn't have a kid.
So while technically Trisha was the only person to say Keem shouldn't have a kid, Ethan responded by saying it was sad that Keem had a kid and never claimed to disagree with Trisha. I mean, when you look at that original podcast clip, does that look like Ethan's defending Keem's right to have a kid? Not really. So the fact that Ethan acted like Augie was lying there is pretty disingenuous in my opinion. But of course, that's just what I think. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section below to all of this H3 stuff, including the lawsuit, the Keemstar beef, and anything else discussed in this video. If you'd like to keep up to date with any drama involving H3, be sure to subscribe with notifications on because I always update you guys when something new comes out. Thank you so much to my channel members for supporting the channel, in particular Scrubby who's donated $100 a month. But with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in another video.